Welcome to the Elokus channel. This is class number 5 in the discourse Zeus Chukas 5672, which is the 7th discourse in the overall book, B'Shasha Egdimu. This is going to be class number 4 in chapter 26 of the discourse. Okay, so in last class we were discussing the source in the last few classes. In this chapter, we're discussing the power to be able to be mitzaref osios, the power, the koach elyon, as he calls it, the very, very sublime power that rests where there is a sentence, where there is letters, where there is a paragraph, where there are words that are composed together. There is a hidden, very lofty and super conscious power in the author of those letters, the ones who spoke, articulated those words, that they themselves are not even aware of. That's a hidden power that directs and guides. It's kind of the manager of the words. It's the manager who puts the words together, the letters together, to form the vessels of articulation, and which is above and beyond the conscious mind. And as we discussed in last class, how it's even deeper than the ability to be able to be creative and create ideas. From a place even higher than that comes the ability to be able to present those ideas and to find the words to present those ideas. And he said that comes from the essence of the koach hayuli of the seichel, which means that the power of the mind, from the mind in its most pristine and limitless and undefined state, that's where this power of formation of letters comes from. Now, and then he adds, and that's where we're going to start from, all the way in the end of Daf Mem Beis. We're very close to the end of chapter 26, which we're going to finish. We're going to start Be'ezus Hashem chapter 27 now in this class. And in its root, he says, Huma atzmus hanefesh. It's even higher than the koach hayuli, the beginning of the mind. The soul has 10 powers. So we understand that the point of contact, where every power exists in two levels. The powers exist as they are in a state of emanation. When the powers come forth and they emanate, each one in their own, it's the power of this power, that power, and so on and so forth. And then there is the soul itself. And then there is the junction point where the power meets the soul. And where the power meets the soul, that power is very, very, very pure and very non-defined as a particular power. For example, the power of kindness, once it emanates, it becomes very distinct as kindness. But when it's still in the soul, it's hardly noticed as kindness. It's the concept that we were learning earlier. If you remember, Esa Sphira Sagnuza is the 10 hidden powers. When they're still hidden in their source, you don't see that it's this power or that power. So, however, it's still a seed for a particular power. So when we said earlier that the koach to be able to direct letters is from the power of the intellect, it's the koach ha-seichel, it's the koach ha-chachma. He uses the word, he uses over here the word seichel. Koach ha-hiyuli, the seichel, seif kol seif, at the very, after everything is said and done, notwithstanding how lofty it is, it's the power of the most abstract of the power of the power of intelligence in its most limitless state. However, still the power of intelligence. Now he's taking it a notch higher. He wants to say it's even above the entire koach of intellect. It's the koach of the atzmos hanefesh. It's really rooted in the very substance of the soul itself. Now, in order to kind of support that idea that the power to combine letters comes from the very, very soul itself, completely beyond the power of intelligence, he's going to compare that to the power of letters themselves. And that's what he says over here. The kashem, just like sha'oisi is atzman, that the letters themselves. Ein mekoiran v'savusam or seichel hamusa. They're not produced. Their source and their coming into being is not from the light of seichel hamusa, from the intelligence that is grasped. But rather it comes from the source of intelligence, as it is known, K'moikein, so too, hatzrufe oisi ois, the combining of the letters, hem gamkein, they too come, mimikoyer haseichel, from the source of intelligence, v'sharshan, and their root, mipchinas yechida shebenefesh, which is the power of the level of the yechida of the soul, which for all practical purposes means the soul itself. Shemsham, that from that place, from there comes the root of the letters, Umisham, and from that very same place comes also Koyach Hatziruf, the combining power, Litzaref u'lechaber, to combine and to attach a group of letters that they should group together, and that they should be on standby, ready to receive the infusion of ideas into these combination of letters. So, but what is the? Let's step back a little. He's comparing it to the power of letters themselves. We know the power of speech is very, very powerful power. So much so that the human being is, according to Torah, how do we refer to the human being? Not by what we might think is the greatest power of the human, that the human is an intelligent being. So therefore we should call a human being a maskil, someone who can produce intelligence, or bar seichel, like we say, an entity, an intelligent being. Like an animal is an emotional being, but not that much of an intelligent being. Humans are intelligent, so human should have been called a maskil, which means someone who produces intelligence. But a human being is called a medaber, which means someone who can speak, someone who produces speech. Why is that so important? And that's because the power of speech is taken from a superior place in the soul, even than the power of intelligence. Now that idea, let's give it a little bit, speak about that a little bit. And that is that unlike what we're used to thinking, that speech is produced in the jaw area of the mouth, that's where speech happens. That's where letters are formed, in the jaw, in the mouth, which is where we know that the powers of speech are called the 5 powers of speech. And that's why the power in the divine of speech is the letter Hey, which is the representative of the attribute of Malchut, which the attribute of kingship is depicted by the letter Hey. And one of the reasons for that is that our five organs of speech, 5 parts of the mouth that enable the production of letters. There are certain letters that are primarily produced by the tongue, certain letters that are produced by the palate, certain letters that are produced by the lips, certain letters that are produced by the teeth, and there are certain letters that are produced by the throat. These are the 5 organs of speech. So we would think that's where letters come from, but we know that that's not the case. We know that, first of all, there are letters of thought. When you're thinking, you're not at all inside your jaw. Your thinking is taking place in your head. And we think in language. There are words. So that already tells us that speech doesn't begin in the mouth. The speech begins deeper in the soul, on a deeper level. There's also another interesting idea, is that a person doesn't have to have any training to be able to speak letters. The Alter Rebbe speaks about this in Ageres HaKodesh and Tanya, that one doesn't need training and exercises to be able to speak words. The ability to speak somehow happens upon a person automatically. You learn automatically how to talk. It's almost even less effort than the ability to walk. Parents are more active in helping a child walk. Like the parents hold, the mother and father hold the baby, once you see and you practice, right? Letters it's like either it happens or it doesn't happen. Of course, there are situations where a child is having difficulties, has a speech impediment. And in cases like that, you need a speech therapist, sometimes to help a child speak in general, and sometimes to help when there is certain problems and technical difficulties in speech, where certain letters are being pronounced or certain letters are not. The child does not have the ability to pronounce certain letters, so you go to a speech therapist and they help the child say whichever letter it is. But that is when there is a problem. But in most cases, for most human beings, the speech happens automatically. And there is no, if you think about how many muscles a person needs to move, and the delicacy, or not the delicacy, the delicateness rather, the delicateness, the elegance of how one moves, because a tiny, tiny bit of a movement of one of the, think about it, when you say the letter T, and then you say the letter, what else comes from the tongue? Oh, I'll better. The letter bays, B, and pay. So P, P, or B, right? They both are lip movements. P, B. I have no idea. I mean, you see, with a P, there's a little more energy. It's a little stronger than with a B. B is a little softer, and the P is a little stronger. But who in the world trains the mouth to do that? It's not trained. You don't consciously move your lips in a certain way to do so. So the Alter Rebbe proves from this, or this is one of the proofs from a scientific, from a experiential type of an experience that we all can feel, that the letters are not produced in the mouth. The physical letters, the way we hear them in their physical form, yes, they're produced in the mouth. But really, these letters already exist, the B and the P and the 22 letters of the Aleph base, which are really the 22 root letters of every language. Slightly different nuances, but in general, it's the same letters. All of these letters are embedded in the soul itself. And the reason you don't have to practice moving your lips in order to say a letter is because the letters themselves, when they come out from somewhere deeper in the soul, and they emerge, and they come to the mouth from where they're going to be articulated into speech, they're going to become audible letters with sound waves and printed onto sound waves so that you can hear them and so on and so forth. The letters themselves are moving into your mouth, and they are controlling the movements of the jaw. It's not the movements of the jaw that are deliberately moved in a certain way to produce a certain letter. It's the letter that moves the lips in accordance, the lips and the jaw and the tongue and so on and so forth, in accordance to what it takes for the letter to be expressed. And that's so it's like the production of the letters happen much deeper in the soul. And that's why when it comes the time for a child to speak, as you get a certain age, and that particular power of the soul from where those letters are able to travel outward down to the mouth is released, the speech happens effortlessly and without and in a mindless manner. You do have to be mindful of what you're saying. That's already not related to the letters themselves. That's not related to the speech itself. That is related more to the content that's in the speech. But we're talking the speech itself is generally a mindless type of a thing because it's the letters themselves that drive the vehicle. The letter comes driving into your mouth and it moves your organs of speech in accordance to the letter. So where do the letters come from? So we might think that they come from the intelligence. And the intelligence is so powerful that maybe that's where the world of letters of speech are. But the Alter Rebbe proves that you're not even conscious when you're producing letters. That letters they exist even in the pre-intelligence. And where is it? So there's an expression in Chassidus that says, "Hanefesh maleya oisiyos," that the soul itself is filled with letters. The 22 letters of human speech are embedded in the essence of the human soul. And obviously, inside the soul, there are the 22 letters. Obviously, when you're going to scan a soul, you're not going to see 22 letters floating inside the soul. Because when they're in the soul, they are indistinguishable from the soul itself. And just like we can't see the soul, we can't see the letters of the soul, but that's really where the letters emanate from. And they make their, obviously in that state, they are not noticeable. They're so fine and so spiritual and so beyond distinction that as we said, you don't see them, you don't feel them, you don't know them, but that's where they are. And whenever any stream of consciousness has to move, any movement of consciousness within the person always needs letters, needs words. And what happens is, whenever the intellect wants to move, meaning when a person is creative and you create a new idea, and that idea is going to flash in your mind, it has to dress itself in letters. Because without letters, there is no consciousness. Now, usually on this very, very, very high sublime level of chachma, where you have a first flash of an idea, the light is so strong that it blinds the letters. You don't really hear words. But there are words there. There are letters there. They're very, very subtle. Then when the energy moves into the state of bina, where you're understanding an idea already and you're really fleshing it out, that's when you can start, if you're paying attention, you can already hear yourself speaking in language. Chachma doesn't really feel like a language type of an experience. It's more like a picture experience, but there are words there as well. But in bina, the letters become a little chunkier and you can sense them a little more, especially when they come down into the emotion, you can feel them as well. And then when they move into the stage of what we call real thought, that's when you can feel the letters even more, and they become physically detectable. When they go into the jaw, they pick up steam from the heart, which is the breath. And that's when these very same letters get driven into the mouth, and over there they take the physical organs of speech and they move it mechanically to move in accordance to the letter. The letter drives the mouth. So when the letter mem enters the mouth, it will close the lips just enough to produce the m sound. But when the letter p, or the mem or the p or the b, when the letter comes, it just controls the lips to give enough power to do the p, or enough power that it should be a b sound and not a p sound. A bays and not a pay. How? The letter does it without the conjure necessary. So this idea that the shorish of the letters is, and I'm sure we're going to learn about that tons later in the book. So this idea that the letters are rooted so deep in the soul, from the etzem nefesh above the conscious mind, is not only true regarding the letters, but also there's a whole different art. The different art is, as we discussed in earlier classes, in the last few classes, that to take letters at an enormous speed without even having to think too much, to be able to organize words, that the letters should come down in a way that you can form sentences, is nothing short than a miracle. And it's an incredible, powerful computing system, which that system, he says over here, the combining of letters is also in the pre-intellect and rooted in the Yechidah Shebenefesh in a very, very high level of soul. And that's why the human being is called medaber. It doesn't say that over here, because it's primarily in the power of speech that the real height of the human soul, the real greatness and superiority of the human soul is displayed in this ability to be able to speak words. So that's what we learned just now. It's just like it. Let's read it again. Just as the letters themselves. Its root and its source is not from the conscious mind, but from the root from where intellect comes from, whether it's the source of intelligence in as it is embedded in the soul itself, or even deeper, as he calls it, Yechidah Shebenefesh. But just like it is that, it's the same too as the power to combine letters, is also from the source of intelligence, v'sharshan, and their root, from the Yechidah element of the soul. From there comes the root of letters, and from there, also is the power of combining, to combine and to attach letters. So now he's rounding back to the beginning of the chapter. Now, what did he say? He's coming to explain how, when you have a bunch of letters, there is an or klali. In addition to the energy that's in each individual letter, he brought from Tanya that there is a higher meaning that is contained within the word. Every word has a bigger concept than just a letter. But then he learned deeper in the Tanya that when he says there is a higher light in a combination of letters, it's not only the content of the word or the sentence, but in some mysterious way, a very deep power of the soul is residing over this paragraph or over this sentence or over this word, just to enable these letters to line up in such an organized manner that they came about in such a way. That is a dwelling of this high power of the soul. Therefore, when you scramble the letters, when you scramble them and you separate them, you're losing, the only thing you're left with is the energy of the letter. But the content that was in the word is gone. That means a higher energy that was now in each letter is gone. And even this, and then along with that is even a more superior power of the soul is also lost. Again, this is all to come to explain the reduction that happens when the 10 hidden spheroids come out and become differentiated, each sphera onto itself. It's like this. It's like the fragmentation of a word. Harei, the betzira va'oisi is beteva achas. So what comes out of this is when letters are combined to form a word. Lavada or seichel. So in addition to the light of intellect, hamalubish ba'teva, that is enclosed in the word, which is, let's say, for example, we use the example of the word baruch, which means blessing, which has the content, the rich content of what blessing means. Yesh b'zeh oid or elyon, there is another higher light, shalamayla harbe, which is much higher, mahaseichel hamusak, that is higher than the intellectual idea that is grasped in that word. And that's like an or makif, that's like an encompassing light that's hovering over the word, the koach hamitzaref, the power that combines the letters to hold the letters together. The glue, so to speak, that holds these letters together. Now, in the parentheses, he concludes, now in the words of Tanya in chapter 12, in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, when he speaks about this idea, he mentions that in a combination of letters, there is a koach elyon v'chayos klali. He mentions two. The Alter Rebbe is very precise in his words. He says there is a supernal power and a general life force. So here the Rebbe Rashab, wants to differentiate that the Alter Rebbe is not just saying the same thing with two different expressions, but rather he's referring subtly to two levels. V'ya shloima, we can say the koach elyon. When the Alter Rebbe says there is a koach elyon, a high power, that's a very lofty power. What is that? That's this koach that we're talking about. Hu koach ne'elam, this is this hidden power that comes from the super soul, comes from the very, very yechida of the soul, as we said earlier. V'hu ha'atzmi shelo or pnimi. This is the very, very essence of the internal light. Kamoishu b'sharshay u'mekayrai. What does he mean over here? It's the atzmi of the or pnimi. See, the whole idea of letters and words is needed for words and letters are kalim, they're vessels, and therefore they are mechanics, so to speak. They are entities that belong to the world of the or pnimi. An or makif, an encompassing light, doesn't need words because it's not going into kalim. For example, give an example. You go to when you're singing a song. So if you're singing just a nigun, or nigun a tune without words, that's an or makif. It's very powerful. You can feel energy. You don't have to define the energy. You can feel, you're feeling something. You don't even know what you're feeling. You're walking into a room, you have 3,000 people singing a song, and it's a tune. And you're not met. And let's say it's a tune without words. It picks you up and puts you into a different realm. It's a sweeping energy. It's not in Caleb. If they're singing a tune and the tune is already with words, so if you don't know the words, for instance, it's in a different language, you don't speak Hebrew, and they're singing a nigun with Hebrew words, then as well, you don't have to hear the words. You're just overtaken by the power of the nigun, of the tune, not of the words. But if you do understand the words, then you're already hearing an internalized message. That's because of the words, because of the letters. So, since we are talking about over here of letters, and we're saying the letters is emanating from the deepest point in the soul, but it's the shayrish of or pnimi and the etzem hanefesh. Or pnimi, let's say, for example, is intellect. Intellect is an or pnimi, or all the 10 spheres are really or pnimi, right? So intellect, emotions, these are all energies that go into vessels, as opposed to desire that we're going to speak later in the Maamor, which is above vessels. But intellect, emotions, right? So there is the intellect itself, there is the emotions itself, and then there are words that come along with it. What he's saying is that the words are embedded in the essence of internalized energy more than the or itself, than the light itself. More than the intellect that's going to be in these words. The words themselves, the oisiyos, are rooted in the atzmi, in the essence of the or pnimi. But what is that? Not so much over here, he's not referring to the letters. The koach to articulate words, which means the power to combine letters. And he's not talking about letters, sorry. Right now he's referring to the koach ha-metzaref, the power to combine letters, which is this koach ne'elam, which is this concealed. This is the essence of the or pnimi as it is in the essence of the soul. As it is in its root of roots. When he says v'chayas klali, however, when he says that in addition to the or ne'elam, there's a hidden light. When there is a combination of letters, the Alter Rebbe says there is a koyach elyon, and then he says there is a chayas klali, a general light. That is referring to or mizgala. That's already more. It's not so much a hidden. It's not so hidden. See, the power that combines the letters, you wouldn't even know it's there. You have to be a philosopher to recognize that there is some mechanics, there's some manager over here. It's a manager that is completely in the background, that no one even sees. It's a hidden managing force that is completely obscure and hidden. But then there is, in addition to that, there is something that is more revealed. There's v'chayas klali, or mizgala is a light that reveals itself. V'hu b'chinas or makif. This is already an or makif, an encompassing light. V'yesh loima, we can say shazel b'chinas yechida v'chaya. That these are the yechida and the chaya, two powers. Chaya is a more revealing power. Yechida is a more atzmi, more essential power. And these are the two powers. He says this again. This is all parenthetical that the Alter Rebbe means when he says now what he means exactly the or makif. In this context, I don't understand yet that well. Maybe in tomorrow's class we'll come back and address it. But let's just do the kitzer. This is with this he concludes chapter 26. Kitzer, and this that he says in the book of Tanya. The b'chol teva, that in every word yesh koach elyon, there is a higher power, v'chayas klali, and a general life force. Ha'oila al kolona, that's above the individual power that's in each letter. Remember over there he says that every letter has a spiritual godly force, and here there is a power that goes above it. V'hi machaber son, and this is what attaches them, u'metzarfa son, and combines them. So he explains that this is more than just the concept that's in a word or that's in a sentence. Number one, that when you combine letters, you have a word which have meaning. And when you combine letters and more letters and make many words together, you have a sentence which has even more meaning. That's one level. That's a higher power. But there's even a higher power, which is a more hidden power, which is the power of the nefesh to combine the letters. It says, that is enclosed in the word. The koyach ha-metzaref, the power that combines, and his root is from the essence of the soul. And with this we conclude chapter 26. And Be'ezus Hashem, tomorrow's class will start chapter 27 and see what does this mean above. Then he's gonna explain what is the or klali that is in the word that is part of the content of the word. What is that above? In as much as the Esa Spheres Aknuzais and the 10 hidden spheres are concerned. And what is the higher power that's there as well? That is the hidden power. Be'ez Hashem, let's leave that for next class. Chapter 27. Class number 6. Be'ez Hashem coming up.